Welcome back to Dark Fear. You know those tiny towns in Oregon where nothing ever seems to happen? The kind of places with one gas station, a post office, and maybe 200 people? Well, tonight you're going to hear 8 true stories that prove those quiet little towns are hiding something much darker than you'd ever imagine. We've got stories from people with normal jobs, truck drivers, mail carriers, cooks working the night shift, regular folks who thought they were just going about their day until they saw something that changed everything. Something they were never supposed to see. Something the government doesn't want you to know about. If you're new to Dark Fears, hit that subscribe button right now because we bring you real horror stories that actually happened. These aren't made up. These are true events. Ring that bell so you never miss when we drop our next video. Now, before we start, I need to warn you. Some of these stories are seriously disturbing. So, turn off your lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't watch this alone. Let's begin. I drove into Beldam Ridge on a gray winter afternoon. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not peaceful silence, but the suffocating kind, like the entire town was listening. Old houses leaned at odd angles along the narrow road, their roofs heavy with wet moss. The fog sat low, swallowing sound and distance, and the sky looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. My editor sent me here to write a charming, small-town winter feature. But the moment my tires touched the cracked pavement, something inside me tightened. I parked outside a tiny cafe with a flickering sign. When I opened the door, the bell jingled weakly, and every head inside turned at once. No conversations, no background noise, just the scraping sound of a woman's shoes as she slowly walked to the counter. She poured coffee without asking what I wanted, her movements stiff and mechanical, like she'd rehearsed this moment hundreds of times. Beneath the varnish on the wooden counter, I noticed carved letters, faint but readable. Don't stay after dark. Before I could ask about it, a man in a flannel jacket leaned toward the woman and murmured, "You shouldn't be here now." I looked around. Every customer was staring at me, faces blank, like they were waiting for something. I paid for the coffee, left abruptly, and stepped outside into the cold. As I walked toward my car, an elderly man stepped out from behind a stack of chopped firewood. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were frantic, darting around as if someone was following him. "You're not one of them," he whispered sharply. I tried to smile politely, thinking he might be confused. When I asked what he meant, he shook his head with trembling hands. "You shouldn't be here. Not after dark. Outsiders disappear." His voice was hoarse, terrified. I tried brushing the comment off. Small towns sometimes have odd characters, right? But then he pointed toward the cafe window. The people inside were still watching me, motionless, faces blank. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "The town chooses. Once the bell rings, you're either one of them or one of us." I was about to ask what that meant when a metallic bell sounded through the town. Deep, hollow, like a warning siren. The cafe patrons immediately stood up from their seats in perfect unison. The old man flinched and stepped back. "It's starting," he whispered before disappearing around the corner, moving faster than someone his age should be able to. My heart hammered as I got into my car and turned the ignition. I needed to leave. I sped toward the same road I entered on. But when I reached the edge of town, the road was gone. Not covered by snow. Gone. Asphalt replaced by dense forest. Untouched, unbroken, as if no road had ever existed. My GPS screen flickered and died. I stepped out, breath visible in the freezing air, staring at the identical wall of trees. No tire tracks, no signs. Just unbroken wilderness where a road had been only minutes earlier. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. I scanned the tree line, my breath uneven. The trees looked unnatural. Trunks too close together, branches twisted into arches as if forming a barrier. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was lost or disoriented. But then I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A pale face between the trees. Not moving, not blinking, watching me. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't hide, it didn't run. It just observed me with an expressionless stillness that made my stomach drop. My instinct screamed at me to get back inside the car, so I did. I sped toward the same road I entered on. But when I reached the edge of town, the road was gone. Not covered by snow. Gone. Asphalt replaced by dense forest. Untouched, unbroken, as if no road had ever existed. My GPS screen flickered and died. I stepped out, breath visible in the freezing air, staring at the identical wall of trees. No tire tracks, no signs. Just unbroken wilderness where a road had been only minutes earlier. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. I scanned the tree line, my breath uneven. The trees looked unnatural. Trunks too close together, branches twisted into arches as if forming a barrier. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was lost or disoriented. But then I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A pale face between the trees. Not moving, not blinking, watching me. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't hide, it didn't run. It just observed me with an expressionless stillness that made my stomach drop. My instinct screamed at me to get back inside the car, so I did. The fog was so thick I could barely see 2 feet ahead. My boots slipped on the ice as I ran, lungs burning with cold. A shape moved through the fog to my right, tall, thin, jerking unnaturally. It crossed in front of me and stopped. The creature towered over me, its limbs unnaturally long, bent at angles that made no anatomical sense. It cocked its head like an animal, trying to decide whether I was worth the effort. Its face, if it was a face, had skin stretched too tightly over sharp bone. No lips, no expression. Yet when it opened its jaw, I heard a human voice. Coffee? The cafe woman's voice. The sound was wrong, like a recording slowed down and warped. I backed away slowly, but the creature mirrored my movement perfectly, stepping when I stepped, stopping when I stopped. Fear stole my breath. Logic vanished. I turned and sprinted toward the distant lights, branches whipping my face as the sound of something crawling rapidly over snow followed behind me. I don't remember falling. I only remember waking up. My wrists were tied with rough rope, my head pounding. The air smelled of damp earth and mildew. I was in a basement, cold concrete walls, a single hanging bulb swaying as footsteps creaked across the floorboards above me. A man descended the stairs slowly. It was the flannel jacket man from the cafe. He knelt near me, speaking in a calm voice that didn't match the horror of the situation. "You shouldn't have run," he said. "They were already watching you." "Running means resisting," I struggled, digging my nails against the rope, trying to loosen the fibers. He noticed and leaned in. "You'll only hurt yourself," he murmured. "The choosing only hurts if you fight it." He stood and turned toward the stairs, speaking over his shoulder. "We have rules here. Every winter, someone must stay." My blood turned to ice. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. 2 townspeople dragged me from the basement into what looked like a town hall. Chairs stacked against the wall, banners for long-past festivals hanging in tatters. but the floor had been cleared for a large circular symbol drawn in charcoal. My feet scraped against the wooden floor as they pulled me to the center. Candles were placed around the circle, flames flickering even though there was no breeze. A crowd gathered silently, forming a ring around me. Their faces were blank, pupils too dilated, like they were half asleep or hypnotized. The cafe woman stepped forward, holding something wrapped in burlap. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a jagged, rusted blade. Her voice was flat and emotionless. "Winter takes. Winter keeps," the townspeople responded in perfect unison. "Winter chooses." Before I could scream or run, the lights flickered and the fog seeped into the hall through unseen cracks. And standing inside the fog was the creature. The creature stepped forward, its jagged limbs brushing the floor with a scraping sound. Its head tilted as if sniffing me. The townspeople watched, unblinking, waiting for it to take me. I felt something snap inside me. Not bravery, but pure animal survival. I lunged sideways, knocking over candles. The symbol smeared beneath my feet. The creature recoiled, shrieking in a sound like metal tearing. The townspeople panicked, their trance shattered. I sprinted toward the back door, throwing my body against it until it burst open. I staggered into the snow, running toward where the road should have been. Behind me, I heard screams. The creature wasn't attacking me. It was attacking them. I collapsed near the same pile of firewood where I'd met the old man. He appeared out of nowhere, grabbed my arm, and pulled me toward a narrow path behind the houses. "You broke the circle," he hissed. "You weakened their hold. Now you can leave." Branches slapped my face as we ran. I glanced back once and saw the creature towering over the town hall. Its limbs wrapped around the building like a spider claiming prey. The old man shoved me toward a clearing. The road was back, asphalt, reflectors, everything exactly as it should have been. "Tell no one," he warned. "Small towns keep small gods. And small gods require sacrifice." Before I could respond, he vanished into the fog. I never wrote the article. I left Oregon and never looked back, but even now, I sometimes wake in the night thinking I hear tapping on my window. A week after I escaped, I checked satellite images. According to maps, Beldam Ridge doesn't exist. The area shows nothing but forest, no roads, no structures, no town. But sometimes, when I drive at night, I swear I see a flicker of old wooden buildings in the distance. Sometimes, I dream about the creature's voice whispering coffee. And sometimes, I feel like someone is waiting just outside my front door. Winter chooses. Winter keeps. I moved to Hollow Creek in early September, chasing cheap housing and quiet. I'd recently quit a suffocating corporate job in Portland, and the idea of living alone in a small town felt like a reset button. The rental was an old 2-story house on a hill, overlooking a cluster of worn buildings and pine forests stretching forever. The landlord, a wiry man named Dale, handed me the keys and said, "Don't worry about the upstairs. Just keep it closed." His tone was casual, but the sentence stuck with me. The upstairs had a long hallway and several empty rooms. Yet, he insisted it remain untouched. I chalked it up to structural issues or stored junk. Still, the house felt strange. The air was colder upstairs, and every time I passed the staircase, I felt like someone was standing just out of sight on the landing. The first night after unpacking, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, enjoying the silence. Then I noticed it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, from above. I froze. Hollow Creek was quiet, the kind of town where you could hear a dog bark half a mile away. These footsteps were unmistakably inside my house. I convinced myself it was the wood expanding with temperature changes. But that night, as I tried to sleep, I could swear someone was walking back and forth upstairs, pacing. On the third morning, I stepped outside to bring in a delivery and instinctively looked up at the house. A girl was standing in the upstairs window, pale skin, dark hair, head tilted slightly, staring straight down at me. I froze mid-step. I hadn't opened the upstairs door since I moved in. I blinked hard, thinking it might be a curtain pattern or a shadow. But no. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the glass. I dropped the package and ran back inside, heart hammering. I sprinted up the stairs, adrenaline replacing fear. The upstairs hallway was cold and smelled of dust. The door to the room with the window was firmly shut. I grasped the knob, hesitating, then yanked the door open. Empty. No girl, no footprints, no open windows. Only a bare room with faded wallpaper and a broken rocking chair in the corner. I checked the closet, then the adjoining bathroom. Nothing. When I turned to leave, the rocking chair moved. Just a single, slow creak forward. I backed out, closed the door, and forced myself to breathe. I told myself I was stressed, seeing things because of isolation. But when I went outside later to retrieve the package, the girl was gone. The window was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from behind the glass. Needing human contact, I went into town and stopped at the only diner. Everyone inside turned to look at me, not hostile, just curious. I took a stool at the counter, and the waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, poured coffee without asking. When I mentioned which house I was renting, her hand froze mid-air. The man beside me, wearing a faded logging jacket, lowered his voice and said, "People don't stay long in that place." I laughed nervously. "Because it's old and creepy?" He stared at me without smiling. "Because she doesn't like company." The waitress shot him a warning look. "Don't scare the boy." I insisted. "Who was she?" The waitress sighed, leaning closer. "There was a little girl who lived in that house. Her father locked her upstairs when she misbehaved. One night, she climbed out the window to escape. Broke her neck on the steps. She pointed toward my house through the diner window, visible on the hill. People say her spirit still looks out that window, waiting." My stomach dropped. "You're messing with me." "No one messes about Hollow Creek," the logger said. "We leave the dead alone." That night, when I got back, all the upstairs lights were on. At 2 a.m., footsteps woke me. They weren't pacing this time. They were running. Quick, light, frantic. The sound moved down the hall, then stopped right above my bedroom. I stared at the ceiling, heart racing. A soft, muffled sobbing followed, like a child crying into her hands. I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs. The hallway was darker than usual, the air colder. I reached the same bedroom, hand trembling as I turned the knob. The moment the door opened, the crying stopped. The rocking chair faced the window again, but it hadn't been like that earlier. When I stepped closer, something shifted in my peripheral vision. I turned sharply, catching a flash of movement, a small figure darting into the closet. I lunged and yanked the closet door open, flashlight beams shaking. Empty. The shelves were bare, just dust and cobwebs. Then behind me, the rocking chair creaked. I spun around, shining the light on the chair. It rocked violently, as if someone had just leapt out of it. I backed into the hallway and slammed the door shut, locking it. The running footsteps started again, only this time, they weren't upstairs. They were on the stairs. Coming down, The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. A shadow moved under the crack. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. Something brushed the door, like fingers or fabric. I stood there motionless, afraid even to blink. A soft, childlike whisper slid through the wood. "Help me." I opened the door with shaking hands. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement. I checked every room again. Silence. But when I returned to my bedroom, my blood ran cold. On the inside of the window, smeared into the condensation, was a small handprint. Too small to be an adult's, too high to belong to a child standing on the ground. I wiped it away with a towel. A minute later, as I sat on the bed trying to calm down, I looked up. The handprint was back. This time, it was on the outside, and it wasn't alone. 5 handprints now lined the glass, as if someone were leaning against it, peering inward. I yanked the curtains shut. The next morning, I called the landlord and told him about the footsteps, the lights turning on, the window. He didn't argue. "Pack your things," he said immediately. "I'll refund your deposit. Just leave, no disbelief. No questions, just urgency." Before leaving, I decided to open the last place I hadn't checked. A locked room at the end of the upstairs hallway. I had found the key in a random kitchen drawer. When I turned it, the lock clicked loudly, echoing in the silent house. Inside was a child's bedroom. Pink wallpaper faded to gray. A dollhouse covered in dust. A mattress on the floor with a thin blanket. And on the wall, carved repeatedly into the wood, were 4 words. "He won't let me out." I stepped closer. The carving was frantic, uneven, like it had been done in desperation. The sun shifted through the window, revealing fresh wood shavings on the floor. Not decades old, fresh. Someone had carved it recently. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. The door wouldn't budge no matter how hard I pulled. My breathing turned sharp, rapid. The room felt smaller, like the walls were edging closer. I spotted an old shoebox under the mattress and pulled it out. Inside were photographs. Black and white pictures of a little girl in the same room. She stood stiffly, expression blank, hair tied with ribbons. In the last photo, she wasn't alone. A tall man stood behind her, half hidden by the shadows, hand gripping her shoulder tightly. The final photo made my blood freeze. It was taken from outside the house, zoomed in through the upstairs window. The girl stared out, same blank expression. But the angle showed the photographer was down on the hill. Someone had been watching her, and someone had watched me. In the bottom of the box, tucked beneath the photos, I found a newspaper clipping. Headline: "Father found dead after daughter's fall. Neck broken in basement." The article mentioned the father had claimed something in the house pushed him. The doorknob behind me began to twist. The door flung open and cold air rushed in. The hallway lights flickered. I ran downstairs, determined to grab my keys and leave forever. But as I passed the basement door, it creaked open on its own. A heavy, damp smell seeped out. I should have kept running. I should have ignored it. But something pulled me in. Not curiosity, but a feeling that answers waited below. I flicked on the basement light. Only the first bulb lit, casting sickly yellow light over concrete steps leading into darkness. Halfway down, my foot hit something soft. I looked down, a child's shoe, tiny and white. The second bulb flickered on, revealing a rope hanging from a beam, not tied into a noose, tied into a loop the size of a wrist, like a restraint. A scratching noise echoed from behind a boarded section of the wall. Slow, desperate. The boards began to bend outward, as if something on the other side was pushing them. A whisper floated from the darkness. He locked me here. I backed up the stairs, nearly tripping as the boards began to splinter. I burst into the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and ran to the front door. But when I yanked it open, someone was standing on the porch. A man, pale, sunken eyes, same face as the father from the photo. He stepped forward. "You let her out." I slammed the door, locked it, and ran for the back exit. As I rushed past the stairs, something stopped me cold. The girl stood halfway down the steps, no longer pale, no longer empty. Her hair dripped, as if she had just climbed out of water. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you." Behind her, the father's voice roared, "Get back here!" She turned her head slowly toward him. The lights shattered. Every bulb in the house exploded at once, plunging us into darkness. A scream tore through the house. His scream, not hers. Then silence. A calm, eerie, complete silence. I don't remember driving away. I just remember pulling into a gas station miles from town, shaking violently, covered in dust and cobwebs. The attendant looked at me like I was in shock. When I told him where I'd been staying, his expression changed instantly. "That house burned down years ago," he said slowly. "Nobody lives there." Impossible. I had been inside it for days. I saw it. I touched it. He walked to his computer and pulled up satellite images. Nothing but an empty patch of land, scorched foundation, debris, no house. I left Oregon the next morning. Sometimes, when I dream, I see that upstairs window, the girl looking out, not sad, not angry, free. But when I wake up, there's always one new handprint on my bedroom window. Small, high up, waiting. I moved to Cottage Grove in early autumn of 2019, hoping a quieter town would help me recover from a burnout phase. I had rented a small duplex near the river, close to an old wooden bridge the locals called Devil's Span. The lady who handed me the keys told me, half joking, half warning, never to walk near the bridge after midnight. She said people heard whispers coming from under it, like someone calling their name. I brushed it off as small-town superstition. The first week was peaceful. The mornings smelled like pine and damp soil, and the evenings were quiet except for crickets and the soft current of the river. I often walked the trail after sunset to clear my head. One night, as fog slowly rolled over the river like a slow pulse, I noticed something odd. Birds avoided the area under the bridge. They sat on wires and trees nearby, never on the beams. Even raccoons stopped at the edge of the shadow and turned around. I wasn't scared, just curious, until on the sixth night, as I passed the bridge, I heard something faint beneath the creaking wood. A whisper. My name. I froze. There was no one around. I told myself it was wind passing through the gaps, but it didn't sound like wind. It sounded wet, close, and intentional. The next night, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Stress can play tricks on the mind, especially when you're alone. Still, I avoided the bridge for a day, choosing a different walking route. But the thought kept looping in my head. How did the whisper know my name? I hadn't introduced myself to anyone besides the landlord. Nobody in town knew me well enough to play a prank. On the eighth night, I gave in to curiosity, or maybe stubbornness, and returned to the river trail. The air felt colder than usual, damp enough to sting my lungs. As I approached the bridge, the surroundings quieted unnaturally. No insects, no river rush, no crunch of gravel under my shoes. It was like sound itself had been stolen from the world. Then, a whisper slid out from under the bridge again, closer this time. Come, please." It wasn't my name this time. It sounded like someone pleading, like they were crying underwater. I leaned over the railing, trying to see beneath the slats. The river was calm, dark, almost oily. The beam of my flashlight cut through the fog, revealing only swirling mist and black water. I pulled back, telling myself I was being stupid, that some teenager was probably messing with newcomers. Then something touched my ankle. A finger, cold and dripping. I jerked away and stumbled backward onto the road, nearly slipping. But when I pointed the flashlight down, nothing was there, not even ripples. I walked home without looking back. I didn't go near the bridge for a few days. I slept with my bedroom light on, telling myself I was just tired, overwhelmed, hallucinating. But the more I tried to forget that cold touch on my ankle, the stronger the memory became. It wasn't imagination. Skin has a way of remembering texture. Whatever touched me felt human. On the fourth night, I decided to prove to myself it was nothing. I left home before sunset and reached the river while there was still some pale orange light reflecting off the water. I stood on the bridge, forcing myself to look down between the wooden planks. The river slithered underneath, silent and dark. I squatted and angled my phone through a gap to take a photo. When I reviewed the image, my stomach dropped. Beneath the surface of the water, barely visible, was a pale face, completely still, eyes open, watching me. I convinced myself it was some optical illusion, the reflection of me, debris, something logical. But when I zoomed in, the face wasn't shaped like mine. The jaw was too long, the eyes were too wide, and worst of all, the face wasn't warped by the water the way reflections should be. It was perfectly still, like it didn't belong to the river at all. I decided to take the photo to the police station. Cottage Grove was small, one receptionist, one deputy, and a radio scanner echoing through the room. I showed the deputy the picture and explained what I had seen. He didn't laugh, but his eyes narrowed with something I didn't expect. Fear. Without a word, he took the photo to the back office. Minutes later, he returned, handed my phone back, and suggested politely but firmly to stay away from Devil's Span at night. The tone in his voice wasn't dismissive. It was protective. Outside the station, an older man smoking by the entrance overheard. "Bridge takes who listens," he murmured. He explained that years ago, several people had gone missing near the river. No bodies recovered, only reports of whispers and sightings of faces in the water. Some called it the echo drowning phenomenon. Others called it the hungry water. The man pointed to the fog-wrapped river. "It wants attention. The more you notice it, the more it notices you." I walked home shaken, clutching my phone. That night, I dreamt of being underwater, arms tangled in algae, something whispering into my ear despite being submerged. When I woke up, my phone had a new photo. The bridge. Taken at 3:17 a.m., I had been asleep. I deleted the photo immediately, convinced it was some glitch or nightmare bleed over. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had taken that picture. Something that had been near my home. For 3 nights, I avoided the bridge completely. I slept with all lights on. I unplugged my phone at night. On the 4th night, I woke suddenly around 3 a.m., the same time the mysterious photo had been taken. There was tapping on my bedroom window. Soft, rhythmic. I sat up slowly, barely breathing. The curtains moved slightly from the draft, and before I could stop myself, I peeked through a gap. The fog outside was dense, shifting like smoke. At first, I saw nothing. Then the tapping came again. This time, it wasn't on the glass. It was inside the room, A whisper, low, shaky, desperate, formed just behind my right ear. "Come back." My whole body froze. The voice was the same one I heard under the bridge. But now, it wasn't a stranger's voice. It spoke with my mother's tone, the exact cadence, the exact softness. Except my mother passed away in 2017. I bolted from the bed, turned every light on, and didn't sleep again. The next morning, muddy footprints led from my back door to my bedroom. Paranoia ate at me. I needed answers. I went to the town's small historical society building, pretending to be a college student working on a research project. The archivist, a thin woman with silver glasses, stiffened when I mentioned Devil's Span. Without speaking, she pulled out an old binder of newspaper clippings. Most were articles about missing people, fishermen, hikers, teenagers. The dates stretched back to the 1950s. One headline stopped me cold. "Local boy claims water voices asked him to jump." The article explained that the boy said a voice beneath the bridge called to him using his father's voice, exactly like what happened to me. I turned to the archivist. "What is it?" I whispered. She leaned in, voice trembling. "The bridge is built over a place where bodies used to drift and get trapped. A natural undertow forms there. They never surface. People believe the river holds their voices and uses them." When I stood to leave, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was ice cold. "If it knows your voice, it will try again." That night, as I brushed my teeth, I heard my name whispered in the bathroom drain. I left the water running until the whisper stopped. I decided I had to face it. Curiosity, fear, maybe anger. Whatever the reason, I couldn't let something unknown stalk me. I returned to the bridge just past midnight. The fog was so thick that the world became a tunnel of gray. Every step sounded too loud. I knelt and shined my flashlight between the planks again. For a moment, nothing. Then, a ripple. The pale face surfaced slowly, directly under me. Its eyes were open, like it wasn't underwater at all. Its mouth moved, barely parting, releasing a whisper that I felt more than heard. "Come, see." The flashlight flickered. Something grabbed the beam from beneath the water like a hand and pulled. The light was yanked out of my grip and vanished below the surface. I screamed and stumbled back, but the whisper grew louder. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many, layered, begging, crying. "Come see, come see, come see." The water beneath the bridge churned violently, as if dozens of arms were thrashing beneath the surface. Then the face broke into a smile. Not human, too wide. I ran. I got home shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice. I barricaded the door with a chair and sat on the floor with a kitchen knife, listening for anything outside. Around 3:13 a.m., always that hour, I heard wet footsteps on the porch. Slow, dragging. They stopped directly outside my door. Then, dripping. Something watery pooled under the door, soaking into the doormat. A shadow shifted beneath the gap, blocking the light. And then, 3 slow knocks. Not fists, knuckles. "Let me in," a voice said, in that same stolen imitation of my mother. I pressed my hand over my mouth and stayed silent. The voice turned angry. "Let me in." The house shook. Pictures fell from the wall. I squeezed my eyes shut as the thing paced outside, circling the house, tapping windows, dragging its drenched fingers along the siding. Just before dawn, everything stopped. When I finally opened the door, the porch was drenched, but the ground past the first step was bone dry. As if the water had appeared only for me, I packed my things before sunrise, ready to leave Cottage Grove forever. But when I walked to my car, the bridge was there in front of me. Not across town, not down the trail, directly in front of my driveway. Fog twisted around it, swallowing the street, the houses, everything. Reality felt wrong, like I'd stepped into someone else's memory. I backed away, but the bridge stretched toward me like a living thing. The whispers began, dozens of them echoing from beneath the wooden planks. "Come see." Hands erupted from the gaps, gray, water-bloated hands. They grabbed my ankles, my wrists, my jacket, pulling me toward the edge. I clawed at the pavement, screaming, as faces surfaced beneath the water. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Mouths open, eyes vacant, trapped forever. I kicked, broke free, and sprinted back into the house, and slamming the door. My vision blurred with tears. I curled into the farthest corner and waited. Minutes passed. The whispers stopped. When I looked out the window, the bridge was gone. I left the next morning before the sun had fully risen. I didn't bother turning in the keys. I just drove. Cottage Grove disappeared in my rearview mirror, swallowed by fog. I moved 3 states away, changed my number, and tried to forget. But something changed in me. I wake every night at 3:17 a.m. The drain in my bathroom gurgles like someone whispering through pipes. Sometimes I find water pooled at the base of my front door. Last week I discovered muddy footprints in my hallway. They led to the bathroom sink. And 2 nights ago, I heard my mother's voice again, soft, pleading, coming from the shower drain. It's lonely down here. Last night, I woke to a photograph on my phone. The bridge, taken from the perspective of someone standing on it, as if waiting. I deleted the picture, but it doesn't matter, because I now understand the truth. The bridge doesn't need you to go to it. Once it chooses you, it brings itself to you. When I first moved to Silverton, I was just looking for a cheap rental. The listing was short. Small house, long-term lease, Mill Creek Road. The price was insanely low, half the market rate. The only strange clause was highlighted in bold at the bottom of the contract. Do not attempt to enter the basement, ever. The owner, an old man with tremors in his hands, slid the paper toward me without making eye contact. His voice cracked as he said, "You'll hear things. Do not respond, and never open the basement door." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was some territorial landlord scare tactic. His eyes didn't change, not a blink. "I'm not joking," he added. "Ignoring it keeps you safe." The house was isolated. 1-story old wood, surrounded by trees dense enough that wind never fully passed through them. I noticed something strange on the very first evening. The house never made a sound. No creaking wood, no settling foundation, no humming refrigerator. The silence was heavy, unnatural, like the house was holding its breath. That night, while brushing my teeth, I heard it. Knock. 3 slow knocks on the basement door. At first, I assumed it was pipes or expansion, but the knocks came again, slow, steady, intentional. The final knock was followed by a whisper, spoken just beneath the doorframe. "Hello?" A whisper that sounded like a child. I couldn't sleep that first night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined tiny footsteps pacing under the floorboards. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard it again. Knocks, slow and deliberate, followed by soft, almost childlike whispers. My hands shook as I approached the basement door. It was old, painted in dull gray, with a rusted lock I hadn't bothered to touch. I pressed my ear against it. The whispering was clearer now, urgent. "Let me out." I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The air felt heavier near the door, like a hand was pressing against my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a raccoon trapped under the floorboards or some pipe vibration. But the voice was unmistakably human, and it spoke with sorrow, not anger. That night, I couldn't sleep a single minute. I sat on the living room couch, listening to the wind in the trees, imagining the faintest creak from the floorboards above. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. When I awoke, the basement door was slightly ajar. I knew I hadn't opened it. The house was still silent, but something inside was moving. The next morning, I cautiously approached the basement. The door, once firmly closed, was now wide open. My pulse accelerated. I could see nothing but darkness inside. On the door itself, someone, or something, had scratched letters into the wood. "I'm still here." The marks were jagged and uneven, like they had been made in desperation. The smell of damp earth mixed with something metallic hit me immediately. I couldn't tell if it was blood or rust, but my stomach churned. I spent the day questioning my sanity. Every sound seemed amplified: the tap of a branch against the window, the groan of a settling floorboard. But nothing prepared me for that night. Around 11 p.m., I heard it again. Soft crying. Not a child, not a woman, but something in between, raw and unhuman. The sound wasn't moving. It was everywhere, echoing through the wooden walls, pressing against my skull. I pressed my back against the wall and whispered to myself that I was imagining it. Then the scratching began again, this time inside the walls. Tiny, frantic marks running along the plaster like fingernails. The basement was no longer just a room beneath the house. It was alive. By the fourth night, I refused to go near the basement, but it called to me constantly. Around midnight, I awoke to movement on the stairs. The house had no creaks normally, yet the staircase groaned softly as though a small figure was climbing. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it up the steps. Nothing. Then a shadow flickered across the living room wall, too small to be a full-grown person. It darted up the stairs and disappeared. My heart raced. I whispered for whoever or whatever it was to stop, but the air felt thick, pressing against my lungs. I tiptoed upstairs, flashlight trembling. The top landing was empty, but I noticed something chilling. Tiny footprints in the dust, leading from the bedroom door to the closed basement door. They didn't belong to me. The whispers began again, louder, closer, almost at ear level. "Why did you leave me?" I bolted downstairs, trying to escape the suffocating dread. The footsteps followed. I ran outside, air cold against my sweat-soaked skin, and the house stood silently, watching. I didn't sleep again that night. Desperate, I visited a neighbor the next morning, an elderly woman named Mabel. When I told her about the basement and the whispers, her face turned pale. "Oh, honey, Mill Creek Road isn't kind to renters," she said. "That house, it's been empty for decades. People hear it calling. They never stay long." I asked what she meant. "Basements have memories. This one, it keeps them alive. Children mostly, sometimes adults. The last tenant vanished after a week. Nobody found him. Just his flashlight lying on the floor." I nodded, trying to dismiss it. "Superstition, old wives' tales." Until she leaned closer and whispered, "Whatever you hear, don't answer it. Whatever you see, don't go down there. It knows names. It knows faces." And at hungry, I left shaken, glancing at the house across the street. Its windows glinted like cold eyes in the sun. That night, the house was silent, until I heard my own name whispered in the living room. That night, I slept with the lights on. Around 2:47 a.m., I heard a scraping sound. The basement door, closed when I went to bed, was slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. I froze, listening. Then, slowly, it creaked open farther, as though pushed by invisible hands. My flashlight illuminated nothing. My stomach tightened. I took a cautious step forward. The air was frigid, tasting like iron. A small voice whispered, almost imperceptibly, "Please." I stumbled back. Something inside the basement shifted, heavier than a person, but faster than any animal. I slammed the door and backed against the wall, holding my breath. The scratching inside grew frantic. And then silence. I realized the house was testing me, waiting, learning. By night 7, I was exhausted. Every sound made me flinch. At 3:01 a.m., I heard something moving in the kitchen. Not footsteps, not wind. The refrigerator opened slowly, with a soft creak. A whisper emerged from behind the counter. "Come to me?" I shone my flashlight. Nothing. Then a small puddle of water appeared on the floor, forming a vague shape, like a child kneeling. It moved as I stepped closer, but never fully took form. The whispers grew urgent, layered, impossible to ignore. I ran upstairs, slammed the door, and stayed in the bedroom until dawn. When I checked, the puddle had evaporated, but tiny wet footprints led straight to my bed. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. I considered leaving immediately, but I needed proof. I grabbed my phone and approached the basement door. The temperature dropped sharply as I got near. I held the phone camera against the gap. Handprints appeared. Small, pale, wet, pressed against the wood from the inside. They moved as though someone was pacing, following me with their fingers. I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the door just a crack. Darkness poured out like a living thing. The whispering grew deafening. "Don't leave me." I slammed the door and ran outside. The neighbors were awake now, staring. The house stood silently, but I could swear the windows followed me. I packed at dawn. Every step toward my car felt heavy, as though invisible hands were pulling at me. The house remained behind me, silent and watching. I drove off, the smell of damp wood and something metallic clinging to my clothes. Later that day, I checked the photos on my phone. Every picture taken near the house showed faint figures in the windows, barely visible, staring. In one shot, a pale hand pressed against the basement door. The house hadn't just been alive, it had been aware. I moved states away. Silverton faded from my map, but not from my mind. Last night, at 2:59 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new notification, a photo. The silent house on Mill Creek Road. The basement door open. The caption, "I'm still here." The house doesn't care if you leave. Once it knows your name, it will wait. Watch, whisper, and maybe invite you back. Sometimes I hear faint knocks under my floorboards, even now. And I know the basement is still alive. I was driving down Highway 58, just past Oak Ridge, late one Friday night in October 2020. The road was deserted, trees on either side casting black shadows under my headlights. Rain had started, making the asphalt glisten like dark glass. I was tired, hungry, and about an hour from the next town. That's when I saw her. A young woman, soaked, thumb out, standing by the side of the highway. Her clothes were outdated, almost vintage-looking. She didn't shiver, even though the rain soaked through her thin jacket. Her eyes met mine as I slowed, and she smiled softly. Something about her face was hauntingly familiar, though I had never seen her before. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and she slid into the passenger seat without a word. Her presence filled the car with a cold dampness, like fog condensed into human form. I tried to make small talk, but she didn't respond, just stared straight ahead, silent. "Where to?" I asked. She finally spoke, her voice whispery, almost echoing. "As far as you can take me." I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter, a creeping unease crawling up my spine. The drive was unnervingly quiet. Rain hammered the roof of the car, tires hissing over the wet asphalt, yet the silence between us felt heavier than the storm outside. I tried to make conversation, but she didn't respond. Occasionally, I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, expression blank, almost translucent in the dim glow of the dashboard. After 10 minutes, a chill swept through the car, colder than the rain. My breath fogged inside the vehicle, though the heater was on full. Something about her felt wrong. I wanted to stop, to turn around, but the road stretched endlessly behind me, twisting like a ribbon into the darkness. Then I noticed it. The car's rearview mirror reflected not her face, but a shadowy void, blacker than night, with faint white streaks resembling tears running down. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. I blinked. When I looked again, her face was normal. The hair on my arm stood on end. I told myself I was imagining it. But then she spoke, soft and deliberate. "Don't stop here." The hairs on my neck bristled. Something about her voice didn't belong in this world. As we approached a curve near a dense cluster of trees, fog rolled across the highway, swallowing everything beyond a few meters. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. I slowed, feeling an instinctive fear pressing on my chest. She remained silent, unmoving, her gaze locked on the foggy horizon. Then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared behind me. Another car. But as it passed, I realized it wasn't moving. It hovered in the fog, trailing shadows that writhed unnaturally. I blinked, and the lights were gone. I glanced at her. Her lips moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. But I felt the words vibrate in my skull. The temperature inside the car dropped further. My fingers felt numb on the wheel. The fog thickened, and I could no longer see the road ahead. I tapped the brakes lightly, trying to gauge the pavement beneath. That's when I noticed her hand, cold as ice, resting on mine. She hadn't touched me when I looked initially, but now it was there. And the whisper came, soft, sinister. Almost home. I took the next turn instinctively, hoping to find some clearing. The highway twisted, each bend more unfamiliar than the last. My GPS read, "Route unavailable." The road no longer matched the map. The fog thickened to a soup-like density, muffling the sound of rain and tires. I dared a glance at her. She was gone. Empty seat. My heart pounded. I turned to look out the passenger window, nothing but fog and the silhouettes of twisted trees. Then, faintly from the back seat, I heard a whisper. "Why did you stop?" I spun around. The seat was empty, yet the air felt heavy, oppressive, and dripping wet. My hands shook on the wheel. I realized I hadn't passed another car in the fog. No streetlights, no signs, nothing but endless trees. Panic set in. I floored the accelerator, praying for the fog to lift. The whisper followed, now louder, all around me. "Don't leave. Don't leave." I clenched the wheel, staring at the road that seemed to stretch into an eternal void. Finally, I dared a glance in the rearview mirror. My stomach dropped. She was sitting in the back seat, smiling faintly, pale and dripping wet, though I was alone when I last looked. Her eyes glimmered in the faint red of the taillights. I whipped around, empty. The back seat was completely vacant. The mirror reflected her face again, grinning, whispering something I couldn't understand, but felt deep in my bones. The car shuddered. I slammed on the brakes, tires squealing. In the reflection, I saw not just her, but dozens of faces pressed against the glass, pale and hollow-eyed, mouths opening and closing without sound. I screamed and looked ahead. The fog thinned slightly, revealing a curve that led down to a small, abandoned rest stop. I swerved, desperate to stop the nightmare. She whispered again, soft as silk, icy as death. "We'll see you soon." I never stayed on that stretch of highway at night again. I parked at the abandoned rest stop, heart pounding, rain drenching my clothes. The fog clung to the edges of the concrete like smoke. I turned off the engine, hoping the stillness would bring clarity. Then I noticed scratches along the door of my car. Tiny marks, vertical and jagged, as if someone, or something, had gripped it from the outside. I shivered. No one was there. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe she was a runaway. Maybe some drunk kid. My voice sounded hollow in the fog. The whispers came again, from inside the car this time, echoing all around me. "Come back." I bolted. Rain cut my vision, my shoes slick on wet concrete. I ran toward the highway, ignoring the fear crushing my chest. When I turned to look at the rest stop, it was empty, silent. But in the fog, I swore I saw her standing on the edge of the road, thumb out, waiting. I got back into my car, desperate to leave. I turned on the radio for distraction. Static. Then, faintly, I heard her voice over the static. "Turn around." I slammed off the radio, heart hammering. The fog seemed thicker now, almost alive, curling around my car like tendrils. I floored the accelerator, praying to escape. Through the windshield, I glimpsed figures moving among the trees. Pale faces pressed against the trunks, whispering my name. My pulse spiked. My headlights didn't illuminate them, only shadows stretched in impossible directions. The whispering voices merged, overlapping, drowning out the rain and my tires. They wanted me to stop. They wanted me to leave the highway. I kept driving, sweat soaking my clothes, praying the forest would end. Suddenly, the road ahead seemed endless, the fog dense as a wall. I looked back, the rest stop, the trees, even the highway. Gone. Only darkness remained behind me. My chest tightened. The whispers were closer now, inside the car, around me, beneath my skin. "Come with us." I slammed on brakes, but the pedal had no effect. The accelerator was frozen. I tried to open the door, locked. The fog pressed against the windows. Then she appeared in the passenger seat, closer than before. Pale, wet, grinning. Her eyes glimmered, almost alive. I screamed, gripping the wheel as if it could save me. She leaned toward me, whispers cutting into my mind. "You belong." Suddenly, the car lurched forward, alone. I held on. The fog swallowed everything. When it lifted, I was at the edge of Oak Ridge, alive, drenched, alone. The highway looked normal. No fog, no rest stop. Weeks later, while cleaning my car, I found a crumpled Polaroid on the dashboard. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It showed the inside of my car the night she appeared, yet she wasn't in the photo. Instead, dozens of pale, featureless faces filled the back seat. A whisper echoed in my memory. "We'll see you soon." I burned the Polaroid, but I haven't driven that stretch of Highway 58 at night since. The forest waits. The fog waits. And the vanishing hitchhiker. She still wanders the highway, calling names. Every time I drive alone at night, I check the passenger seat reflexively. I've warned friends never to pick up hitchhikers on Highway 58 after dark. I still hear whispers on rainy nights, faint but clear in the wind. Come with us. The vanishing hitchhiker doesn't need to touch you to claim you. If she notices your headlights, if she sees your car alone in the dark, she will find a way. And once she does, you'll hear her call every night, long after the road ends. It was the dead of night when I rolled into Lebanon, Oregon, driving along Route 22 after a late shift. Rain had started to fall steadily, making the neon motel sign flicker. Pine Hollow Motel, vacancies available. The place looked abandoned in patches, paint peeling, the parking lot cracked with weeds pushing through. I was exhausted and didn't care about appearances. The lobby clerk was a gaunt man, mid-60s, eyes hollow, sitting behind a scratched counter. He barely acknowledged me as I handed over cash for a room. No key, just a number scribbled on a tattered piece of paper. As I followed the dim hallway to my room, a chill ran down my spine. Every door I passed seemed to watch me. The air was thick, smelling faintly of mildew and something metallic. I dismissed it as old plumbing. The room itself was modest, a single bed, a cracked lamp, and a mirror above the dresser. Nothing unusual at first glance. But the moment I sat on the bed, I felt eyes on me, though I was alone. The rain outside grew heavier. Then, a soft knock came from the window. The knock came again. I approached the window, but it was just rain streaking the glass. When I turned, I caught movement in the mirror. A figure, pale and blurry, standing behind the dresser. I spun around, nothing. My heart pounded. I tried to rationalize it. Reflection in the glass? A trick of the light? Yet, every time I glanced back, the figure seemed closer, though nothing had moved in the room. The lamp flickered, casting long, twitching shadows across the walls. And then a whisper came, soft but unmistakable. Check the bed. I froze. Something cold brushed my ankle. My stomach twisted. I looked down. Nothing. The room was suffocating. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the shadows stretched and writhed, shapes forming into faces that screamed silently. By 3 a.m., I made a decision. I had to leave. But the thought of the lobby clerk's hollow gaze unnerved me. I rushed to the lobby. The clerk looked up, expressionless. "You shouldn't have stayed in that room," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shook his head. "Room 6. Every guest who stayed there reported nightmares. Don't wake up." I laughed nervously, thinking it was some weird superstition. But then he leaned closer. "The mirror. It doesn't just reflect. It watches. And sometimes, it decides who stays." I swallowed hard. Something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. I grabbed my bag and ran for the car. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie silence. When I glanced back, the motel looked different. Brighter somehow, cleaner, as though it had never been abandoned. Yet the sign flickered ominously. I drove off, but the sense of being watched didn't leave. And that night, I dreamed of faces pressed against the mirror in room 6. That night, back at my own home, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I awoke to the same pale figure, standing in my bedroom doorway. My heart froze. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I could see its distorted reflection in my window, merging with the streetlight outside. I tried to blink. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. Then I noticed scratches on the windowsill, long, jagged, wet, with something dark. My breath quickened. I felt the cold pressing down on me. The whisper came again, barely audible. "You can't leave." I bolted from the room, grabbed my phone. No signal, nothing. The figure appeared again, this time behind the door. Every shadow in the room stretched toward me, pulling, twisting. I realized the motel hadn't released me. Its curse followed me. And somehow, room 6 was still alive. Weeks later, curiosity, or perhaps compulsion, drove me back to Route 22. The motel's sign glimmered in the distance. I tried to drive past unnoticed, but headlights illuminated room 6. A hand pressed against the window. I froze. Then the door swung open, and the same pale figure stepped outside. I slammed on the accelerator and fled. Even as I left the highway behind, I felt the presence following me. Shadows lengthened in my car, stretching like fingers. Whispers filled the air. "You belong here." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every reflective surface, the TV, mirrors, even my smartphone, showed fleeting images of room 6 and the pale figure. I realized the motel was more than a building. It was a trap, a sentient place feeding on fear. And the curse wasn't confined to its walls. A week later, my phone rang at 3:03 a.m. No number, just static. Then a whisper, "Come back." I dropped the phone. The air around me felt colder than winter. Shadows in the corners of my apartment moved independently, forming shapes that resembled the motel and room 6. I tried to ignore it, but every reflective surface now acted like a portal. Faces pressed against mirrors, peering from glass, whispering. The scratches began appearing on my own windows, mirroring those from the motel. I realized then that room 6 had attached itself to me, following me wherever I went. One night, the mirror above my dresser fogged despite the heater running. Words appeared in condensation. "You will return." I grabbed a cloth to wipe it off. The words reappeared immediately, written larger, more urgent. I backed away. My reflection warped, morphing into the pale figure from room 6. Every attempt to leave or ignore it failed. The motel's influence was inside me now. The curse followed me. My home no longer felt safe. The figure whispered constantly, especially at night. "It's time." I understood. Room 6 didn't just trap people, it claimed them, body and mind. I checked my old motel key, kept as a souvenir, a stupid keepsake. It was gone. I hadn't touched it. I searched the apartment, only to find scratches forming a trail from my front door to the mirror. The whispers became voices, growing louder. "Room 6, come back." Fear gripped me. My apartment now felt like an extension of the cursed motel. I realized there was no escape. Every night since then, shadows appear in my apartment, whispering and pressing against the walls. Sometimes I see glimpses of the motel. Room 6 mirrored in my doors, windows, and even digital screens. The figure waits patiently, always silent when observed, whispering when alone. I have not slept more than 2 hours at a time in months. I've moved twice, across cities, states, but it follows. Mirrors, reflections, scratches, they appear wherever I go. Room 6 is alive, and it hunts those who escape. Every time I see a motel on a dark highway, I feel its gaze. I know one day the cursed room 6 will find me again, and when it does, there will be no leaving. I had always been fascinated by old railroads, so when I heard locals talk about the abandoned tracks near Tillamook, I knew I had to see them. It was a chilly October evening, the sky gray and low, threatening rain. I parked my car near the overgrown tracks, flashlight in hand, and stepped onto the gravel path. The tracks stretched into the fog, disappearing between twisted trees. The silence was complete, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. I walked slowly, imagining the trains that had once carried goods and people along this route. Then I heard it, a deep, resonant whistle, echoing through the mist. My heart skipped a beat, but that was impossible. The tracks were abandoned. The whistle came again, closer this time, followed by a faint rumble beneath the gravel. I froze. A shadow emerged from the fog, a massive train, black and glinting, yet somehow translucent, moving soundlessly along the rails. Its lights flickered like dying embers, illuminating twisted, pale faces pressed against the windows, staring right at me. I took a cautious step back, flashlight shaking. The mist seemed to bend around the train, carrying with it a cold, metallic smell and whispers of long-dead passengers. I couldn't move. The phantom train glided closer, wheels never touching the rails, emitting a low, mournful hum. The fog wrapped around it like liquid, hiding its edges, making it impossible to tell where it ended and the mist began. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw the conductor. A gaunt figure, face pale as ash, eyes hollow, staring directly at me. A cold wind whipped along the tracks, carrying voices in a language I didn't understand. Whispers of sorrow, warning, and regret. I tried to retreat, but my feet felt rooted to the gravel. Something inside me was drawn forward, towards the spectral locomotive. The train slowed as if it recognized me. Windows rattled, and the pale faces pressed closer, mouths opening in silent screams. My chest tightened. I could feel the pull. The train wasn't just passing, it wanted me to board. Then the whistle pierced the night again, high and keening, vibrating in my skull. It was a summons I couldn't ignore. Against all reason, I stepped closer, heart hammering, adrenaline screaming for flight. I approached the train, compelled despite every instinct screaming to run. The car doors slid open silently, revealing darkness inside. I peered in, and the shadows shifted, forming elongated, hollow-eyed faces. A chill surged up my spine. I took a step onto the platform. The wooden boards groaned underfoot, though nothing alive touched them. A hand, icy and pale, brushed against my arm. I froze. When I looked, no one was there, just the echo of whispers circling my mind. The train's interior appeared normal at first glance. Wooden benches, brass handles, dim lanterns. Yet, every reflection in the polished surfaces revealed ghastly faces, some crying, some grinning. I realized they weren't reflections. They were inside me, in my mind. A whisper came from the darkness. Sit. Stay. Forever. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The train lurched forward, though no engine was visible. The platform behind me was gone. Only mist and darkness stretched into eternity. I stumbled into a car, trying to find a way off. Doors slammed behind me. Panic set in. The whispers turned to wailing, echoing through the train, bouncing off invisible walls. I ran down the aisle, passing face after face pressed to the glass, mouths opening in silent screams. The lanterns flickered, casting shadows that twisted into skeletal hands. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. A shadow moved toward me, and a cold hand clasped my shoulder. I spun around, empty. The wailing intensified. I realized the passengers were not just ghosts. They were trapped souls, drawn by the train, unable to leave. Their sorrow and fear filled the air, almost tangible, pressing against my chest. The train veered onto a curve. Outside, the foggy forest twisted into impossible shapes. Trees stretching like skeletal arms, the sky burning with faint red and purple light. A figure appeared at the front of the car. A tall conductor, black uniform, face hidden in shadows. He raised a skeletal hand. "No one leaves." His voice was a rasp, echoing in my skull. "You've been chosen." I staggered back. The car lurched violently, as if alive. Faces twisted, some screaming silently, others staring straight at me with hollow eyes, pleading. The conductor gestured. The train seemed to speed up, though I could hear no wheels. The mist outside twisted, forming ghostly versions of the track ahead, looping endlessly. I realized then, the train wasn't just abandoned. It was a trap for the living. Once aboard, it didn't matter how fast or far you ran. The fog, the whispers, the shadows, they were extensions of the train itself. I ran toward a side door, trying to pry it open. It wouldn't budge. The whispering grew louder, echoing off invisible walls. I glanced at the windows. The forest outside moved in impossible ways, trees stretching and twisting like the limbs of trapped spirits. A cold wind filled the car, extinguishing lanterns. Darkness became total, and the whispers now formed words. "Stay. Forever." I dropped to the floor, covering my ears. Faces emerged from the shadows, pressing down, staring into my soul. I felt myself losing sense of time and space. The train had claimed part of my mind. Then, suddenly, the floor jolted. A burst of light appeared, a break in the fog, and I saw my car parked on the roadside, headlights flickering. Desperate, I sprinted toward the light, ignoring the shadows clawing at my legs. The train seemed endless, but I felt a pull, a way out. I burst through a doorway and found myself standing on the roadside, the mist dissipating. My car sat there, exactly where I left it. But my clothes were wet, my shoes muddy, my hands trembling. When I glanced back, the tracks were gone, replaced by normal forest. No train, no fog, nothing. I drove home in silence, heart racing, replaying every sound, every whisper. Something had followed me, some residue of the train's curse. Weeks later, I noticed strange things. Lights flickered, shadows moved unnaturally, and sometimes I heard the faint echo of a whistle at night. Mirrors reflected impossible shapes, elongated figures in train uniforms. I could feel it watching, waiting. The train had marked me. Every time I drove near abandoned tracks, the hairs on my neck rose. I knew the phantom train was still out there, wandering the foggy rails, seeking its next passengers. At 3 a.m., a whistle echoed in my apartment. I froze. The air grew icy. The fog seemed to seep through walls, curling around corners. I saw shapes moving outside, across the street. Ghostly train cars, stretching impossibly long. I ran to the window. Faces pressed to glass, screaming silently. I understood. The train never stopped, and its passengers never left. I moved far from Tillamook, but the train followed in whispers and shadows. Sometimes I wake to hear the whistle, feel the cold press of its carriages. I know it waits, forever roaming the abandoned tracks, claiming the curious and the foolish. And if you ever hear a whistle on a foggy Oregon night, don't follow it, or the phantom train will take you too. I had heard stories about the forests near Glide, Oregon. Locals whispered of travelers who vanished without a trace, swallowed by the dense pine woods. Being a photographer and thrill seeker, I dismissed them as campfire tales. That October evening, the sun dipped low, and I parked my old Jeep at the trailhead, the map on my phone showing a seemingly simple loop through the silent woods. The forest was unnervingly still. No birds, no rustling of small animals. Only the crunch of my boots on damp pine needles. Mist clung to the ground, curling between the towering pines like spectral fingers. I could feel the air grow colder with each step, the fading light filtering through the branches in ghostly shafts. I stopped to photograph a cluster of twisted roots when I noticed something odd. Footprints in the mud, large, deep, human-like. But they didn't belong to me. I frowned, thinking perhaps a hiker had passed recently. But the prints continued, perfectly spaced, straight through the forest, and then vanished abruptly into thin air. A shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. The silence around me seemed alive, pressing in from all sides. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, bouncing back from unseen corners. The forest seemed to twist, paths bending in ways that defied logic, trapping me in a maze of shadows and trees. A voice, soft and almost melodic, whispered from somewhere deep in the woods, "You shouldn't be here." I couldn't move. The phantom train glided closer, wheels never touching the rails, emitting a low, mournful hum. The fog wrapped around it like liquid, hiding its edges, making it impossible to tell where it ended and the mist began. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw the conductor. A gaunt figure, face pale as ash, eyes hollow, staring directly at me. A cold wind whipped along the tracks, carrying voices in a language I didn't understand. Whispers of sorrow, warning, and regret. I tried to retreat, but my feet felt rooted to the gravel. Something inside me was drawn forward, towards the spectral locomotive. The train slowed as if it recognized me. Windows rattled, and the pale faces pressed closer, mouths opening in silent screams. My chest tightened. I could feel the pull. The train wasn't just passing, it wanted me to board. Then the whistle pierced the night again, high and keening, vibrating in my skull. It was a summons I couldn't ignore. Against all reason, I stepped closer, heart hammering, adrenaline screaming for flight. As night fell, the woods became oppressive. The fog thickened, swallowing the trail, leaving only a few feet of visibility. That's when I saw them. Shadows at the edge of my vision, tall, thin, human-shaped, but impossibly elongated. They didn't move normally. They glided silently, bending and twisting as if the trees themselves had taken human form. I froze, breath visible in the frigid air. I whispered to myself that I was hallucinating, exhausted from hiking and photographing all day. But when I stepped forward, one shadow detached from the rest, gliding toward me with unnatural speed. A guttural sound escaped my lips, half scream, half choke, as I stumbled backward. The shadow halted, tilting its head as if observing me with cruel intelligence. I realized the others were circling, keeping a careful distance, yet surrounding me completely. The fog warped around them, thickening, obscuring any escape. I turned to retrace my steps, but the path had vanished. Every landmark I'd used to navigate, fallen logs, rock formations, twisted roots, seemed different, unrecognizable. The woods were rearranging themselves, and the shadows were guiding me deeper. Suddenly, one shadow lunged, not running, but gliding, silently, its form stretching unnaturally as it passed through the mist. I felt a cold brush against my arm, freezing my blood. The whispering voices surged, a chorus of distorted syllables surrounding me. I spun my flashlight, desperately trying to see, but the light caught only glimpses. Limbs bending at impossible angles, pale eyes reflecting like glass, mouths opening without sound. My breath came in ragged gasps, forming misty clouds in the freezing air. I stumbled, almost falling over a root, and that's when I saw it. Human, but wrong. Its face was pale, stretched, lips frozen in a silent scream. It raised a hand, pointing deeper into the forest, and the shadows obeyed, gliding toward a darker section, as if leading me to something I didn't want to find. I ran blindly, heart hammering, branches whipping my face. The fog seemed alive, wrapping around me like hands trying to pull me down. The whispers grew urgent, almost desperate. Come, closer. Every instinct screamed to escape, but I was no longer sure which direction led out. The forest had trapped me. I ran blindly through the mist, branches clawing at my clothes and face. Every direction looked identical. Twisting trees, gnarled roots, and thick fog curling like smoke. The forest had become a maze, impossible to navigate. My flashlight flickered violently, plunging me into darkness before catching on the twisted shapes around me again. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Heavy, deliberate, echoing as though on solid ground. But the fog swallowed everything else. I froze, heart hammering. The shadows around me stretched, warping the light from my flashlight into grotesque, writhing forms. I could see dozens of elongated shapes circling me, silent but alive, with malicious intent. A low whisper slithered through the air, a chorus of voices overlapping. You belong here. Forever. I stumbled, tripping over a root and landed hard. When I looked up, one of the shadows was inches away, face pale, eyes hollow and unblinking. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, and the fog around it thickened, curling into tendrils that reached for me. My adrenaline surged, and I scrambled to my feet, running blindly in a random direction, praying for a way out. The forest seemed endless. Trees bent unnaturally, forming walls of wood and mist, guiding me toward some unseen center. The whispers grew louder, almost chanting, as if the woods themselves were alive, drawing me into their heart. After what felt like hours, I reached a clearing. The fog here was denser, swirling violently, obscuring the moon. At the center stood a massive, gnarled tree, blackened and twisted like an ancient sentinel. The shadows coalesced around it, forming a towering figure, human in shape but impossibly tall, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed faintly red in the swirling mist. I stumbled back, nearly collapsing. The whispers now formed words I could understand. Stay. Become one with the forest. The ground around me shifted. Roots rose like hands, gripping my ankles, trying to pull me closer to the tree. My flashlight fell, illuminating dozens of pale faces pressed against the mist. Faces of people who had vanished here, twisted and trapped, their eyes pleading for release. I screamed, yanking my legs free, heart pounding, and ran toward the edge of the clearing. The shadows followed, gliding silently, bending through the trees in ways that defied physics. Every escape path I tried seemed to vanish, the forest rearranging itself like a living labyrinth designed to trap me forever. I realized then that this was no ordinary forest. It had a consciousness, a hunger, and the ability to manipulate reality. I wasn't just lost. I was being hunted by something ancient and malevolent. Breath ragged, I pressed forward, trying to keep moving despite exhaustion. The shadows thinned briefly, then thickened again, forming a corridor leading deeper into the forest. I had no choice but to follow. Every step echoed, but the sound bounced unnaturally, as though the forest itself mocked me. A whispering voice, clearer than before, resonated directly inside my head. You cannot leave. You will join us. The temperature plummeted. My skin felt like it was crawling. Shapes began appearing in the mist. Twisted humanoids, half-formed, their limbs stretching into the fog. Some held broken branches like spears, others just reached with long, spindly fingers. The longer I looked, the more I felt the forest wrapping around me, pulling me into its center. I tripped again, landing near a pool of black water that reflected not the sky, but a distorted, red-hued version of the forest. I glimpsed my own reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, mirrored by the shadows surrounding me. I recoiled, realizing the forest wasn't just a place. It was a predator, feeding on fear, reshaping reality to trap its victims. Desperation overtook reason. I ran blindly, stumbling over roots, branches slapping my face, fog clawing at my legs. Every direction led back toward the heart of the forest. The whispers grew louder, chanting my name, beckoning me toward the gnarled sentinel tree. Eventually, I found myself in another clearing. The ground was etched with strange symbols, carved deep into the soil, encircling the massive tree. The shadows stood along the edges, faceless, silent, watching. I realized this was some kind of ritual site, the epicenter of the forest's malevolence. The whispers became chanting, low and rhythmic, vibrating in my chest. My legs trembled. The shadows reached toward me, and I could see fragments of past victims. Their pale eyes staring from the mist, their bodies twisted into impossible angles. The forest had claimed them. I thought I might be next. My body screamed to flee, but no path led out. Every attempt to run brought me back to the circle. The mist condensed, forming the face of a pale entity, skeletal and elongated, eyes glowing red, hovering above the tree. It whispered one final command: join us, or be lost forever. I turned and ran blindly, branches slashing at me, roots grabbing my ankles. Every scream of mine was swallowed by the forest, absorbed into the mist like fuel for the entity's hunger. I ran until my lungs burned and legs threatened to collapse. The forest seemed endless, yet somehow I emerged at the edge of the woods near my jeep. Fog lingered, curling in low clouds along the ground, but the shadows had stopped chasing. I didn't look back. My jeep was my salvation. I jumped inside, engine roaring to life, tires spraying mud as I sped down the narrow trail. The whispers followed me for miles, faint but constant, drifting in the wind. I dared not slow until the forest disappeared behind me. Even then, I could feel it. The forest watching, patient, waiting for my return. I realized the silent woods didn't release its prey completely. A part of it had attached to me, invisible, lingering, a tether to the horrors I had witnessed. Weeks later, I still feel the presence. In reflections, in my dreams, in the quiet moments between midnight and 3 a.m., I hear whispers, soft, melodic, beckoning. The silent woods of Glide never let go. Every time I drive past forests in Oregon, I feel those unseen eyes, the stretching shadows, the pale faces pressed against mist. The stories were true. The woods are alive, hungry for fear, patient, eternal. And one day, if I am careless, the forest will call me back. I can only warn others. If you hear whispers in the mist, if paths twist unnaturally and the forest seems alive, leave immediately. Don't look back, and never, ever wander alone into the silent woods of Glide. As the final story fades and the highway falls silent, remember this: fear doesn't always come from the creatures hiding in the darkness. Sometimes it comes from the things we cannot explain. Every trucker, every traveler on a lonely road has a moment where reality blurs and instinct whispers, something is wrong. You've just listened to real accounts from real people who faced the unknown and lived to tell the tale. Their courage reminds us that the world is bigger and darker than we imagine. And the things hiding in the shadows don't always want to stay hidden. Thank you for being brave enough to travel with me into the night. If you enjoyed these terrifying true stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the darkness alive. Because here on Dark Fears, we don't just tell stories, we open doors. And once a door opens, something might follow you back. Sleep tight, if you can.